You think you know Neanderthals? Knuckle-dragging, grunting, club-waving cavemen.
Wrong. What if I told you they could bench press a modern bodybuilder, track a reindeer through a blizzard without a compass, and had brains bigger than yours? What if the real freak of nature isn't them? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to look at your own DNA differently. But first, hit that like button and subscribe. Not because I asked, because you're about to find out why Neanderthals were the most misunderstood badasses in human history. Let's go. You think being tall makes you tough? Walk into Ice Age, Europe, and that long, lanky frame of yours would freeze solid before you finish shivering.
Neanderthals weren't short because evolution messed up.
They were short because nature looked at the freezing wind, the endless snow, the kind of cold that cracks stone, and said, compress everything.
Make it dense. Make it unbreakable.
So that's what happened. Their skeletons weren't just sturdy. They were overbuilt, like someone designed them for a world that hated weakness. Wide rib cages that flared out like barrels, housing lungs the size of industrial bellows. Every breath pulled in more oxygen, more heat, more life from air that should have killed them. Their shoulders, broad enough to make a modern gym rat stare in disbelief, not for show, for power. For the kind of strength you don't post on Instagram. The kind that keeps you alive when a ton of angry fur and tusks decides you look like dinner. And then there are the hands. Oh, the hands. Massive palms. Thick, powerful fingers, thumbs so strong that some researchers believe a Neanderthal could crush a modern human's grip without even trying. Imagine that for a second. You reach out to shake hands with someone who lived 80,000 years ago, and before you can say nice to meet you, your bones are grinding together like gravel. They didn't need tools to break things. Their hands were the tools. Every strike, every grab, every moment of contact with the world around them was backed by a crushing, relentless pressure that we can barely comprehend. These weren't people who opened jars. They were people who reshaped the world with their bare palms. But here's where it gets quietly intense. Think about what those hands could do beyond survival. The same grip that could shatter bone could also hold, steady, deliberate, patient. The same arms that hurled spears into mammoth hides could pull someone close in the freezing dark. Neanderthals didn't just endure the cold together. They shared heat, body to body, skin to skin. And with bodies like theirs, compact, powerful, radiating warmth like a furnace, that closeness wasn't just practical. It was something deeper. Something that makes you wonder what it felt like to be held by a creature built for the harshest world imaginable. Strength like that doesn't only protect, it consumes, it envelops. And in the long, brutal nights of the Ice Age, when the wind screamed outside the cave and the only warmth came from fire and flesh, you can bet those thick arms and crushing hands were used for more than hunting. They held on, and they didn't let go. Because that's what Neanderthals were built for, not just to fight the world, but to hold on to each other inside it. Their bodies tell the story. Every dense bone, every powerful grip, every barrel chest says the same thing. We don't break, we don't drop, we don't let go. And that raw, physical, almost overwhelming presence is exactly what made them the absolute freaks of nature that no modern human could ever hope to match. Now, from their hands and their chests, let's look up at their faces. Because if you thought the body was strange, wait until you see what they were hiding behind those brow ridges. You've seen the body, compact, dense, powerful enough to crush and cling in equal measure. But now look up, past the barrel chest and those heavy shoulders, up to the face. The one we've spent centuries calling ugly, primitive, a failed sketch. But what if we had it backwards? What if that face wasn't a mistake, but a masterpiece carved for a world that would have shattered ours? Start with the brow ridges, not just thick, massive. A continuous shelf of bone running above the eyes like a protective overhang. Modern humans have tiny, almost decorative brows by comparison. Neanderthals looked like they were always scowling, always judging, always ready. But those ridges weren't for Biao Qing. They were armor. They shielded the eyes from snow glare, from low-hanging branches, from the fists and horns of animals that fought back. Imagine looking into a face like that, not just seeing it, feeling it loom over you. There's no softness there, only function, only a warning that says, I have taken hits that would cave in your skull, and I'm still standing. Then the nose. God, the nose. Huge, wide, projecting forward like a prow of a ship. Scientists call it a cold weather adaptation, warming and humidifying freezing air before it hits the lungs. That's true. But stand close to a Neanderthal, really close, and that nose wouldn't just be breathing, it would be dominating your space. Every exhale, a rush of heat. Every inhale, pulling in the scent of you, of the cave, of the mammoth hide they're wearing. There's something deeply intimate about a face built to process the world so aggressively. You couldn't hide from it. You couldn't look away. Those large nasal cavities didn't just warm air. They amplified every breath into a quiet, powerful presence that filled the space between two people. And the jaw. No chin to speak of, just a solid, forward-sweeping mass of bone and muscle. Teeth worn flat from chewing frozen meat and sinew. A mouth that could tear, yes, but also, what else? Because a face like that, so close to yours in the firelight, wouldn't just be threatening, it would be magnetic. The same strength that crushed bone could also whisper. The same jaw that stripped a carcass could brush against your neck. Neanderthals didn't look weird, they looked intense. Primal. The kind of face that doesn't ask permission. It simply occupies your attention until you forget to breathe. So no, they weren't ugly. We're just soft. Their faces were built for a world of ice, violence, and desperate closeness. And when two Neanderthals pressed their brows together in the dark, when those massive noses breathed the same warm air, when those heavy jaws met in something that wasn't a fight, that wasn't brutish. That was survival of a different kind. The kind that leaves you wondering what it would feel like to be held by a face that could break you, but chooses not to. Now, from that unforgettable face, let's go deeper. Because what was happening behind those ridged brows, inside a brain even larger than yours, might be the most shocking part yet. But before we slip inside that enormous skull, before we rummage through the thoughts hiding behind those ridge-shadowed eyes, let's talk about what those muscles could actually do. Because a face like that, commanding, overwhelming, close enough to feel the heat of its breath, belongs to a body that doesn't just exist in space. It owns it. And the strength packed into that short, dense frame? It's almost embarrassing to compare to anything walking the earth today. A Neanderthal male stood maybe 5'5", same height as a lot of modern men. But that's where the similarity ends. Where we have bones like hollow bird bones, they had solid pillars of calcium and collagen, so thick that their femurs looked like they were designed to hold up a bridge. Their muscle attachments? Massive, especially in the shoulders, the arms, the hands. Estimates vary, but here's the number that should make you uncomfortable. Pound for pound, a Neanderthal was likely 50% stronger than a top-tier human athlete, and in the upper body, some researchers say double. That means the world's strongest deadlifter, after years of steroids and screaming and chalk, would get absolutely crushed by a Neanderthal who just woke up from a nap on a cave floor. Now imagine that strength in motion, not lifting weights in a gym, not flexing for a mirror. Imagine it pressed against you. Imagine those thick, powerful arms wrapping around your torso, not to hug, but to hold you still. Imagine the sheer, quiet pressure of a chest that could crack ribs without even meaning to. There's something deeply, almost dangerously intimate about being that close to something so much stronger than you. You wouldn't fight it. You couldn't. Your only choice would be to surrender to the heat, the density, the absolute certainty that this body was built to dominate, not out of cruelty, but because the Ice Age demanded it. And here's where it gets even more intense. Neanderthals didn't just have passive strength. They used it. They hunted by running straight at woolly rhinos and mammoths, animals that weighed several tons and had weapons built into their faces. They'd jab spears into those beasts at near point-blank range, then wrestle them to the ground while still bleeding from their own wounds. Their skeletons tell the story. Healed fractures everywhere, crushed skulls, broken arms that refused at odd angles. These people didn't just endure pain. They walked through it like a doorway. And they didn't walk alone. They carried each other. Think about what that means for two Neanderthals in the dark. The same hands that could tear a bison apart could also stroke a cheek with impossible gentleness. The same arms that could crush a wolf's spine could pull someone closer, tighter, safer. Strength like that isn't just for killing, it's for keeping. For holding on when letting go means freezing or starving or dying alone. And in the long, brutal nights of the Pleistocene, when the only warmth came from fire and flesh, you can bet that 50% extra strength wasn't used just to hunt. It was used to never, ever let go. Now, from those crushing arms and that impossible grip, let's finally go inside their heads. Because a body this powerful deserved a brain even more shocking. And Neanderthals had one, bigger than yours. You felt the strength. You've imagined those arms wrapped around you in the freezing dark, holding on like the world was ending. But now step back. Look past the muscle, past the crushing hands and the face that loomed too close. Because inside that thick skull, behind those brooding brow ridges, was something that should terrify you even more than their strength. A brain bigger than yours, not metaphorically, literally. Modern humans average about 1,350 cubic centimeters of brain volume. Neanderthals, 1,500. That's not a rounding error. That's a significant, undeniable fact that our textbooks buried for over a century because it made us uncomfortable. How could the so-called caveman be smarter than us? But size isn't everything, right? A sperm whale has a bigger brain and spends its day eating squid. So what were Neanderthals doing with all that grey matter? They were seeing the world differently. A huge chunk of their brain was dedicated to vision and movement. Spatial awareness so acute that they could track a herd of reindeer through a snowstorm without losing their way. They could look at a rock and see an axe. Look at a carcass and see clothing, tools, dinner and shelter. Look at each other and see something worth protecting, worth decorating, worth burying with flowers. And the art. Oh, the art. For years we were told that Neanderthals just copied modern humans, that they had no creativity. Then we found cave paintings in Spain, red ochre outlines of animals, dots, hand stencils, dated to 64,000 years ago. That's 20,000 years before Homo sapiens even showed up in Europe. They weren't copying us. We were late to their gallery. Imagine that. A Neanderthal, fingers stained with pigment, pressing a palm against a cold cave wall and leaving a mark that would outlast empires. Not survival. Expression. They also buried their dead, not just tossed in a hole. Deliberate graves. In some sites, traces of pollen suggest they placed flowers on the bodies, wildflowers. In others, they left tools, animal bones, maybe even food for whatever came next. You don't do that unless you believe in something, unless you mourn, unless you hold the person you lost and think, this is not the end. And then there's the jewelry. Eagle talons, pierced shells, beads carved from animal teeth. Things that serve no practical purpose except to say, I am here, I have taste. I want you to look at me and see something beautiful, something dangerous, something worth touching. Because when a Neanderthal wore those talons around their neck, when they painted their face with ochre, when they smoothed the loved one's hair back before lowering them into the earth with flowers, that's not a brute. That's a poet who can also break your arm. So now you have to ask yourself, what was it like to be close to a mind like that? To feel those heavy-lidded eyes study your face the way they studied a flint core before striking it perfectly? To hear a low voice, yes, they could speak, their hyoid bone proves it, murmur something in the firelight that wasn't just a grunt, but a question, a promise, a memory? A body built for war with a soul built for art. That's the real Neanderthal. And that combination, raw physical dominance wrapped around a sensitive, creative intelligence, is almost unbearably magnetic. You wouldn't just want to survive next to them. You'd want to be seen by them. Now, from those flower-strewn graves and cave paintings, let's talk about what happened when they met us. Because that meeting didn't end with them vanishing. It ended with them becoming you. So you're still here. Good. Because what comes next isn't about bones in a museum or paintings on a cave wall. It's about you, your skin, your blood, the way your body reacts to cold, to pain, to the dark. Because when early humans left Africa and marched into Europe, they didn't find an empty continent. They found them, the Neanderthals. And the moment those two groups locked eyes across a frozen valley, something inevitable happened. Something we've spent centuries pretending didn't happen. But the DNA doesn't lie. They met, they mated, and they didn't do it just once. Genetic evidence shows that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred multiple times over thousands of years, in different places, in different ways. Sometimes it might have been violent. Sometimes it might have been tender. But often, perhaps most often, it was simply two exhausted, freezing, lonely people who found warmth in the only way that mattered when the wind wouldn't stop screaming. Imagine that encounter. A Homo sapiens traveler, far from home, stumbling into a Neanderthal camp. Different faces, different smells, different voices, but the same fire, the same hunger, the same desperate need to feel something other than cold. Now imagine those massive hands, the same hands that crushed bone and carved stone, reaching for you not to hurt, but to hold. Imagine that barrel chest pressed against your back, radiating heat like a furnace. Imagine those heavy-lidded eyes, the ones that could track a deer in a blizzard, now fixed on your face in the flickering light. There's a reason the DNA spread so fast. It wasn't just survival. It was attraction. Raw, magnetic, inexplicable attraction between two branches of humanity that had been apart for 500,000 years. And when they came together, something ancient and electric sparked. Today, if you're not of purely African descent, you carry the proof. 1 to 4% of your genome is Neanderthal. That's not a metaphor. That's a physical reality written into every cell of your body. Your immune system? Partly their gift. Genes that helped you fight off viruses that never existed in Africa. Your skin? Thicker in some places, more sensitive in others. Your hair? Your tendency to sunburn or not. All of it. Touched by those Ice Age ghosts. But it goes deeper. Much deeper. Neanderthal DNA has been linked to your mood, your risk for depression, for anxiety, for that heavy feeling that descends in winter. Some studies suggest it affects your sleep patterns, your pain threshold, even your tendency to become addicted to nicotine. So that late-night cigarette you can't quit? That might be your Neanderthal ancestor whispering in your blood. That raw, restless energy that makes you want to fight or fuck or flee? That might be them too. And here's the most intimate part of all. When you hold someone close in the dark, when your bodies press together for warmth or for want, you're repeating a ritual that began 100,000 years ago. Two kinds of humans, one fire, one breath, one moment of surrender that changed everything. Neanderthals didn't lose, they didn't vanish. They were absorbed, pulled into us, kissed into us. And every time you touch someone, every time you feel a shiver that isn't from the cold, you're carrying on their oldest, most human tradition. The one that says, we don't let go, we merge, we become. So the next time you look in the mirror, don't just see a modern human. See the broad nose, the thick brow, the stocky frame that some of you still carry. See the survivor of an ice age who didn't die, but fell in love with the enemy, and lived on inside you every single day.